Hi, I'm Alex Paulton. I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. I apologize for the late start. Since I am working alone, I occasionally, often slip up. Although I keep, the system should actually be more bulletproof than that. But unless my remote speaker is, my Bluetooth speaker is on, the computer somehow mistakes the microphone for a speaker and tries. That's why I don't get sound when I get started. I hope I do have sound now. If not, please make a comment. Uh, but as I was saying, when my technical incompetence, even though I work in the electronics industry, um, getting started, there are a lot of different paths to getting started in watch collecting. And I've done some of the paths and I haven't others, but I'll talk about the most popular ways to work your way forward. But before I get started, I'd like to remind everybody to check out the review I just did this week of the Bruno Sonla automatic, their Turin model. And they were nice enough to let me borrow two of them. I'm, in fact, mailing them back tomorrow morning. And it's a really it's a decent go anywhere, do anything watch. It's facing tight competition up against things like the Tissot Gentleman and the Nevada Gründchen. That's a nice piece as well. Their integrated bracelet model. TGV just did a nice episode where he compared the Nevada to the Tissot PRX. Hey, TH. Um, Now, before I get started, though, I did want to point out that I am really enthralled with my Irwin Sattler wall watch. You should check out my little piece on that. It really is a nice clock as well as being attractive. It is a good piece of horology and an excellent timepiece. I set this about 21 days ago. It's got about a 30-day power reserve on that pendulum. And I haven't set it in 3 weeks, and it's only off by 10 seconds. And I know I can get it a little tighter because it has an incredibly I shouldn't remember which direction it is, instead of just looking at the screen. It has an incredibly sensitive pendulum mechanism, so you can really adjust it by the fraction of a second just by adjusting how much the weight swings back and forth. It's really a beautiful piece of horology. I do encourage you to check out that video. So the path to watch collecting is such a myriad one. I actually took notes while I was thinking about it over the week coming up because there are a lot of ways. Hey, how's it going, Johnny? There are a lot of ways to get there. You know what I mean? Because you can go just as there are different kinds of collectors, there are different kinds of ways to get there. So instead of trying to categorize them, I'm not going to try to. I'm just going to mention ways to go about it. The first is you buy within the price category you're comfortable with, right? You go out and you go shopping and you find a watch you like. And within your price range, whatever price point you choose, and when some people don't like the term price point, but it's a business term, it means, in other words, they're talking about that price range. So something that sells for about $15,000 is in a different price category as something that sells for $35,000, even though that $35,000 product may eventually fall to a lower price. It was originally an XYZ price point watch or car or painting or whatever. Well, painting arts, visual art's a little different than mechanical art. Leave it at that. So everybody's greeting one another. It's always nice to have people on because it's this show would be nothing without an audience, and so I always am very humbled and pleased by your fandom, your participation, because we're all together here. We're all in the same boat, and we're trying to enjoy the ride, right? Wristwatch check. I'm wearing my Cartier Santos XL Chrono on a rubber. I like to leave it on the rubber because it makes it more casually wearable. It doesn't scream, I am a Cartier. It looks like most other large, blocky, it could be a fossil from a distance. But that's another aspect of watch collecting, how you express the watches in your collection. You could have a Rolex and wear it constantly on a NATO. You know, how how you choose to wear your watches is a different thing entirely. But that's something we maybe should cover in another episode. Let me know. So when we talk, I was thinking of like a good block of watch companies that I would recommend. And there are others, and we're going to talk about them as well. But I just wanted to give the advice that I could give, and I would not worry about it at all. What I call the starting six: Casio, Seiko, Citizen, Orient, Bulova, and Timex. And like I said, there are going to be others out there, but you recommend any of those pieces to anyone who's interested in getting started, and they'll be able to find something for a reasonable price that they will enjoy, will look good, will function well. And some of them fall into some of the other categories that I'm going to mention as well. So that would be the first thing I would think about, would be how much can you afford? Because you can always want something and not be able to. I mean, I'd love to have a private jet. Actually, no, I wouldn't. The carbon footprint would be a joke. I wouldn't mind having a J34 sailboat. That would be a nice low carbon footprint way to really enjoy myself. And that's actually something I should have done when I was a younger man. But that's all right. I can always buy or rent. Actually, rental is the smartest thing at this stage. Go to some island and rent a nice J24, something shorter that I can sail myself. But you know what I'm getting at. Let's talk about watch collecting. Superfly Micros. Hey, how's it going? Anyone else getting buffering every 3 seconds? It could be on my side because I'm here in Germany. Sometimes the internet is faster than others, but then again, that goes for anywhere. I just am highly sensitive to it because I try to do this. So, so when it comes to buying something, if you buy from a reputable dealer at a reasonable price, you're not going to get disappointed. And as a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and use that to segue, because some of those watches in those categories are highly prized, respected pieces, like Bulova, the Devil Diver. They have a nice diver. It's marked to 666 feet, which is why they joke and call it the Devil Diver. That's what I would call an enthusiast, low price enthusiast watch. It was the exact term I made a note about, because there are watches that everyone knows aren't expensive, but everybody loves. One of them being the Amphibia, the Vostok Amphibia. And as much as I'm unenamored with Russia at this point, the watches aren't responsible for policy. And the Vostok was developed during the Cold War, and I was a Cold Warrior on the other side, so I can't say anything. I respect it as a tool, the Vostok Amphibia. And I've owned a Scuba Dude or two myself. I usually wind up gifting the Scuba Dude because it's like a $60 watch, and a gift is also a good way to get somebody into watch collecting. I try to proselytize watch collecting, and also giving someone a nice gift is Haitian voodoo magic. Paul, my father, came from Haiti. I always joke about that, but it's sympathetic magic. If you give someone a thoughtful gift, they'll always think of you. Magic. Let's see. TH. I'm hooked on Seiko. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I find the dials easy to look at no matter their color or case design. Well, I was just about to bring up the Seiko Alpinist. That's another enthusiast watch. That, matter of fact, I saw a gentleman wearing an Alpinist on a NATO in a bar here in Germany, and I knew immediately he was a watch person. Because as I've always said, watches, in addition to being a beautiful collecting thing and a fantastic, horology as just a science and an art, and the combination of the two is awesome. That horology is significant in and of itself. I mean, the internet would collapse without time. Society would collapse without time synchronization. But the watch collecting is also a language. People seeing me wear a Cartier on a rubber strap know, number one, I'm a serious collector, because only a crazy person who is not fat. I mean, there are people who buy products because they're fashion conscious, and I'm not going to knock those people, because Cartier has a tremendous respect as a jeweler. And what's wrong with having a piece of jewelry that tells time? So that's why they also sell so many quartz, because they want a good, reliable timepiece inside that piece of jewelry, or just have a good quartz movement in a watch if you look at it that way. Because as I've pointed out many, many times now, that's why I have some quartz in my collection. I used to be a quartz snob, but I recognize that quartz lost the quartz wars too. Apple won the quartz wars. And quartz now is a quaint way of telling time, just like mechanical, if you think about it like that. Of course, for specialty applications, they're preferred, like another watch on the list, and I have one. G-Shock. Everybody should have a G-Shock in their collection. So, I mean, ironically, you could almost say that that would be the first watch for anybody who's into getting watches, because eventually you should have one in your collection anyway, and you might as well start off inexpensively. And you could pick, this model was $150, and this is the Bluetooth version. I still don't know what the Bluetooth does. I just like it because it's the one with hands. Like, some people mod it and make it a Casio and all that other. But I like the color blue, and I think it's a really rugged piece. And this is my beater end of the world watch. But everybody should have a G-Shock. So a lot of the watches from these companies on this list have models that are historic, if not legendary is a little harsh. Popular and historic is a good way to put it. I mean, Bill Gates wears a Casio Duro, or did. I don't know what he wears today, but he's famously worn a Casio. But then again, he doesn't have to flex. There's an argument I made for my friend to get into watches was, rich people don't buy luxury clothing. They buy quality clothing, and some of them happen to be made by luxury brands. But you're not going to see well, you might, if they're a certain age, a billionaire wearing Gucci sneakers. They might wear a Gucci watch. Because one of the things about being self-confident is understatement. And not too many people of means flash. If you made your money by flashing, you're going to flash harder. Jay-Z, I have tremendous amounts of respect for him, but then he's an entertainer. That's a different, we swim in different seas, but starting with an economical watch is not a bad way to start collecting. And if you get a populist piece, then it'll be one you'll have in your collection years after, because why get rid of it? It's a nice piece and it didn't cost you a lot. Let's see, Johnny, let us not forget that Orient, I did say Orient, has given lots of high-end watches a second breath. A reverse quartz crisis? Well, I think what it is that watches as a fashion, maybe not necessarily as a collecting hobby or a high-end horological pursuit, but watches as a fashion statement, I think, will always have a place. And the average person's not going to drop more than $100 on a piece of fashion jewelry. They'll pay more for good jewelry, but then that puts them into the watch collecting category. But if they're just buying a watch as something to put on their wrist because it looks nice, one of the markets that PRX is chasing. That's why the criticism of the plastic parts in the PRX fall on deaf ears at Tissot, because the people who they are selling that watch to are not the people they'll send it back, and Tissot they won't toss the movement. I looked into it. It's a modular movement in the sense that parts of it can be replaced. So what they would do is they would just simply swap out the escapement module in that watch, or replace it depending on whatever, the cost of the day of the labor, I would assume. But there's nothing wrong with buying a PRX, even if it has a plastic pallet wheel. Pallet wheel and escapement, pallet fork and escapement wheel. Sorry, pallet fork and escapement wheel. That's why I was glitching. I'm realizing I was mispronouncing. But yeah, if you think about it, plastic on plastic requires no lubrication. It's very lightweight. And what would break plastic? We're talking about a material that under the light loads of a watch escapement will last 1,000 years. Okay, maybe the pivot points might break, and then you're screwed because it's a plastic part, because there's still a metal pin in that escapement fork. It's not a plastic pin. So if that metal wear point against the jewel, for example, goes, you're more screwed because of the parts availability than you are from the fact that the pallet fork is made out of plastic. I can understand and recognize the outrage of because that there's a very good rant that TGV even quoted on his show. I just caught it yesterday, today or yesterday. His latest when where he compares the Nevada Grinchen and the Tissot PRX and points out and he quotes the watchmaker's online rant, which I also saw, and he's right. In one sense, it's an atrocity. You know, in one sense, they should. I think the Tissot should just admit that there are plastic parts, and not so much admit, but point out the pluses and the minuses, and say, hey, but they put high tech escapement on the winding wheel, which is I think what really got hit under the watchmaker skin. If they had just simply said low weight, or figure out some way to put it, or just as for the Moonswatch, they made up they didn't make up, it's made of advanced materials, but to use just a high grade polymer, just say it, but there are some, Orient, their escapements are all still metal as far as I know. They might have, I don't know if they've gone to silicon yet. Now silicon escapements are a completely different issue. I know I'm tangenting here, but I figured since we're talking about Tissot and escapements, I figured I'd go ahead and say my piece on that. Maybe I'll chop it out and put it up as a separate rant. But silicon parts are a different thing entirely. And I have an episode on that, so you can just check that out. I'll go back to the topic at hand. Johnny, any basic watch preference entry point to higher end? Well, I mean, it all depends on how much you have to spend. I mean, if your first discretionary spend is $1,500, there are a lot of great watches in that category. I have a friend who he's a contractor, makes decent money, lives here, and he talked his wife into letting him buy a nice high-end piece. And I sold him my Omega Seamaster GMT, a piece that I really liked, but because it would get him started with a piece that he would really like, respect, and enjoy. And I do have too many damn watches. I'm actually going to pick up a Omega Memo Vox, I think they called it, the alarm watch. I forget the name of it, but I've got a line on getting my hands on an Omega alarm watch from the 60s, I believe it is. And I'm looking very much to adding that to the collection, which is another aspect, which I'll get to. Vintage is another pathway, but I wanted to finish up and address Johnny's point and TH's point and all of, the point I'm trying to make about it. If you think about it, the amphibious scuba dude, the Seagull 1963, right? Think about that. That's a beautiful piece. And it's a column wheel chronograph. It's probably the only column wheel chronograph you're going to get for under $1,000. Longines makes it and puts it in their master collection. And Breitlings have got some. I mean, once you hit the $2,000, $2,500 price point, you'll start seeing column wheel chronographs. But usually you're looking now, if you get it from a Swiss manufacturer, you're looking at $3,000 to $5,000 for a column wheel chronograph. There are some that like I said, from other companies, some of them take the Seagull and put it into a different case, which is not wrong. Baltic does that. Nothing wrong with that. Put a good movement into a better case, and you have a better watch. Baltic's another good example of an inexpensive, but I was going to touch on that in the micro brands, because you've got companies like Fairer. I got a Fairer piece here somewhere. Yeah, I've got a Fairer chrono. There's an episode on this one. It's got it's a double chronograph. It's a flyback. It's a Rattrapant double chronograph, and it's fantastic, but it's quartz. That's why you can get away with having this much functionality in a piece like that. But then again, you can get this for under $1,000. This is also a great, I would say this would be a daily wear watch. And if you're that kind of a person, this could be the only watch you wear, because it does everything you need. It gives you the date, and it's got a jillion chronographs in it. Complications. And of course, the Seiko 5. Hamilton khaki, right? You can get a khaki for under $1,000. And so if you pick up an enthusiast watch, you're not going to be disappointed. And you have a piece that you can keep in the collection, if only for novelty's sake, for the rest of your life. You know, you have a Hamilton khaki. There's your beater. Anytime you need to go to a rock concert or someplace you're worried about getting something spilled on your watch, you take the Hamilton or your G-Shock. Pocket watches are another way to go. This is my erotic pocket watch. I got my finger over the dirty bits. Uh, but pocket watches are always a good way to start a collection, buy some vintage pieces. Because I was going to say, vintage is another area to go into. And it doesn't have to be vintage, vintage. This cute thing is from the 70s. You know, almost had focus. There we go. This is from the 70s. Come on. I shouldn't have moved it up closer, but it's worth about, I don't know, 800 bucks, 600 bucks. I wouldn't sell it. I love this thing. I added the bracelet. It's got shrouded lugs, so it works really well with square end links that don't necessarily fit the case, because shrouded lugs, you don't have to worry about that. So vintage is a great way to go. You can go that way with the dress as well. This is my Gerard Perregaux from the 50s. It has a bumper movement in it. You know, this piece is worth about 300, 500 bucks, right? But you wear this with a suit, put a better strap on it. I've got to change the strap, but this was the factory strap. I'll replace it though. Not replace it. I'll put it in a box, but I'll put on a little bit something a little more elegant, because I actually wore it to a convention a couple of months ago, and it looked nice in the suit. But it is a great. Of course, this was in the old timey days. This would be considered a go anywhere, do anything watch, but today it's a vintage suit watch. And I've always said you can get away with a smaller diameter. I think this is a 36. You can get away with a smaller diameter in a suit because it's supposed to be inobtrusive. I have big hands. Some people would say this is a little too big, but it doesn't reach the ends of my wrist. So I keep looking at the screen instead of my hands. I should just know. It sits well on the wrist, so I don't mind. But vintage, this is a Walkman flyback, right? It's worth about $1,000. You pick up something like this, and then a watch like this, you can go and somebody's got a Rolex. What are they going to do? You can't. I always like to wear vintage when I go watch shopping as well, because you can't crap on vintage. It also has shrouded lugs. But what are you going to say about a vintage flyback from the company that eventually got bought by the company that eventually became Breitling? Vintage is a great way to get started because it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, and you get a decent watch. Or like I was saying, as much as I'm unenamored with Russia at the point the watches aren't at fault, this is a Polyot MiG-29, and was given to me by one of the people who was on the team that disassembled the one that defected to the West. So it's got a little bit of a heritage to it as well. So vintage, enthusiast pieces, those are, and I went both of those routes. Those are a great way to get into it. Homages are another way. You could start a collection with a Speedmaster homage, like go to Steinhardt, one of the, or St. Martin, one of the good homage manufacturers. Pagani, that's at the lower end. St. Martin's at the higher end, and so is Steinhardt actually. And pick up, an Explorer 2, an homage, a Speedmaster homage, a Sub homage. You got a 3-watch collection there that they're not the real thing, but they're not fakes either. They look nice, and it gives you an idea what kind of watch you like to wear, because it can get expensive buying a watch that you like looking at it in a photograph, and then you put it on your wrist and you realize that it's not for you. An homage is a good way to get into watches, and it's a way to get a feel for the kind of watch you want to collect without breaking the bank. That's another reason you go with some of the enthusiast pieces. Buy a Devil Diver. It's a good diving watch, and you'll have an idea if you like dive watches. Buy a Amphibia. Well, that's also a diving watch. Seiko 5s, you can get them in all kinds of styles. The Seagull 1963. That's a casual watch. You can wear it with a suit, or you can wear it with jeans, depending on what strap you have on it. It's you can't go wrong with those kinds of watches. And like I said, I put homages in a separate category because there are enthusiast homage watches. A lot of people swear by some of the Steinhardt pieces, and the St. Martins, for example. That's why they're highly praised company. Pagani's breaking out of the mold by starting to put out watches with their own design, or with not your standard XYZ copy. And the company that made the Blue Planet, they're also doing some really cool stuff. And Agiloker, the people who are making the skeleton tourbillon out there, there are some interesting, good pieces that you can buy that won't break the bank, and you can keep even after you have the Patek Philippe and the Vacheron. Yeah, I agree, Johnny. Um, if not mistaken, Tissot made a similar model. Yes. Well, Tissot still makes some great watches, and the PRX is a great watch. It's just you have you have to know what you're buying. But they've got some like the Gentleman, I believe, has a metal, the Silicium. If you get the Silicium, it's got a silicon escapement, if I'm not mistaken. I know the hairspring silicon on it, but I'll look into that. The Tissot Gentleman, if it has I think it has a silicon escapement. I don't think it has a plastic escapement, but I'd be curious. I got to look into that. But the Gentleman, because the Tissot Gentleman, that's another great basic collectible watch. I hate to say entry level, but it's a good starter watch, something to give you a feel of what you're doing. Because a lot of people call the no date Polaris an entry level Jaeger-LeCoultre. It's the only one I'm ever going to own. So they ain't getting more rungs of the ladder out of me. Although this is a fantastic watch. What is entry level? I mean, this, after they've upped their prices, this watch is over $9,000 at retail now. I couldn't afford to buy this watch today. The rising retail market and the weirdness, what's going on. Because while the bubble burst, the upward momentum of the retail prices is still ongoing. But then the corporations turn slower than the Lusitania. So let's see. And then we go into the mainstream pieces. You buy something from one of these, or I'll talk about the in-between people in a second. But if you buy something from one of the mainstream companies like Hamilton, Oris, Mito, Tissot, you already talked about Tissot, Junghans, right? My Junghans chronoscope, there's a Valjoux 7750 in this. This is a really nice piece, and it has a nice look to it. It's got a very classic, the Junghans has a very classic look, right? So, this, I have the leather strap for it, but it's a casual leather strap. It's a light gray, looks really nice with jeans. So this is better for a suit, although it would be a business suit, not a dressy dress suit. I'm still a stickler. I like to wear leather with, when I dress up. But, well, you then Grail watches are another way. When you think about it, you chase the Grail. This was my Grail watch. I finally managed to get it a couple of years ago, but the Zenith Del Primero Chronomaster, specifically the Open Heart. And I really wanted one so bad. And I finally managed to get one. So, chasing something that you really want to get as a watch, because of course, if you want to get into watch collecting, you have desires for watches. So to have a specific desire for a watch, you should always have a Grail watch. I have a new Grail watch. I realize because to me, a Grail watch is one that is nearly unobtainable. If I saved up and I scrimped my pennies, I could probably get it. But the Girard-Perregaux Constant Force escapement is 75,000 used. So yeah, I'll leave that as my Grail for now. If I win the lottery, although I have to buy a ticket first. Let's see. TH, speaking on the topic of vintage, I like it when watch brands reintroduce their 60s, 70s models. For some reason, I gravitate towards the 70s for watch styles. Well, the 70s were very bold and beautiful and, colorful, and let's have fun with the watch, because this is from the 70s. There are a lot of nice pieces out. Well, actually, this is from the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, as well. The flyback here, because Wachman, he was an American. He brought parts in from Europe and assembled the pieces and then sold them in the States. So, and then, like I said, his company got bought by the company that eventually became Breitling. The Germans, I put them in a separate category because their watches run the entire spectrum, just like the Swiss watches run the entire spectrum from cheap to expensive. German watches run the entire spectrum, but I like to point them out as their own category. First off, I live here, so rah rah Germany. Born in New York, if anybody was curious, and they run the gamut. I just sold, unfortunately, I'd show you, although I do have its brother. You know, buy yourself a good German Flieger, right? I mean, this is a 65 millimeter. Don't buy this one. I mean, well, buy this one. Like, keep this on the shelf like a desk clock if I need to time something. But I bought it for the novelty of it. Frankly, my friend is retiring. He's the one I bought the clock from as well. He's selling off everything reasonably inexpensively, and this wasn't expensive to begin with, and he gave me a mark off on it. So I finally got a wrench big enough to fit the gap. So I'm going to open it up and take a picture of that and post it. But get yourself a German Flieger. You know, get something from Sinn, Laco. You know, Sinn makes some really nice pieces, and they make some aviator style pieces. They're the only company that licensed the Navitimer. So if you wanted to buy a legit Navitimer that was smaller than Breitling's 44 millimeters, Sinn makes one. I think it's a 39. 40, but they make a smaller, but it's a licensed Navitimer, legit Navitimer. It's just a Sinn Navitimer. Laco, Aristo, they made Messerschmitt. So you can get those, and then you go upstream. You got Mühl Glashütte, you know. You've got Nomos. Well, Glashütte itself, I believe, got a dozen watchmakers. Bruno Sundl is out of Glashütte. Of course, Lange is Lange and Son. That's, you know, a lot of people, myself included, think that they're on par with or exceed Patek in quality, finishing quality. I mean, Patek doesn't put chatons and heat-blued screws on as many pivot points as Lange does. So at least from a point of anal retentive German engineering, Lange wins. Johnny, the Silicium Tissot are mostly chronometer, more expensive, more precise. So they probably are metal escapements, if not silicon escapement to go with the silicon hairspring, because Swatch makes the silicon. Well, Swatch doesn't do it. It's manufactured. You know, I mean, they have a foundry make the the silicon pallet forks and all and escapement wheels using laser etch silicon, not laser etches in the photolithography. They flash masks, and they, you know, the chemical photoresist chemicals, and they flash it, and then they etch away with acids until you have little teeny pallet forks and little teeny, instead of etching traces in a microchip. But then again, microelectromechanical systems have been doing that for years. The accelerometer in your cell phone is a silicon MEMS device that's not, I mean, it has electronic components aspects to it, but the actual measuring thing is just a little silicon bar that wiggles, and it measures that wiggle, but we're talking at the micro level. So the silicon pallet forks and escapement wheels that are in, for example, the Omega pieces, right? Or actually, this has got the El Primero. This El Primero Chronomaster has a silicon pallet fork and escapement wheel. And they don't require lubrication, and they'll last a really, really long time. You know, wear is the number one enemy of a mechanical system. So got a vintage Tissot, which has a TV crystal suite. Yeah, well, you know, again, the 70s, they had some really nice, cool, whimsical designs, didn't they? Let's see. Webizy. Why did I move to Germany, if I may ask? I was originally stationed here in the early 80s as an electronic warfare soldier. I spent time on the East-West German border against the Russians back in the day when they were still a pain in the ass. Um, and as many Americans who spend time here do, I wound up falling in love with Germany and just enjoying being here. And ich kann ziemlich gut Deutsch sprechen. I speak the language, and so and as a journalist, I work from my computer. So, and I'm the European correspondent for actually for Endeavor Business Media, which owns electronic design, microwaves and RF, power and motion, machine design. It's the largest business publishing company in the States, and I'm their European correspondent. That's my primary day job. I mean, I do some freelance work on the side. I'm a contractor, but my primary day job is putting content to Electronic Design Magazine. I just launched a podcast, in fact, called Inside Electronics, where I talk to various individuals in the embedded electronics industry. Like I just talked to Rodian Swartz about their new 8-channel oscilloscope. But enough of that shameless plug for my day job, because check out those videos, if you're into embedded electronic engineering. But yeah, that's how I wound up here in Germany. And my first marriage was here. My daughters live here, and I met my ex just after I got out of the military. I worked for almost a decade here as a traveling salesman to the American military bases, selling to the PX system. That's why that's a plaque from the USO for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I was the Anheuser-Busch rep at the time during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, throwing all the free parties for the GIs going downrange. And there's also the Heineken one there. You see, I sold everything from. I was Monster Cable sales manager for Germany in the mid '80s. I've been to every military base from Bremerhaven to Aviano during the Cold War when they were all open. And yeah, so I'm very familiar with the country. So I wound up staying, and it worked out for me career-wise. So here I am. I was always a watch person. I've been a watch person since my mother gave me a little cheap white face, black hands Timex in second grade for my communion present, and always wore a nice watch until I sold my car, because I was a big car guy, and my money always was poured into that hole. But about 8 years ago, I sold my car and haven't had a car since. And so I take that money and I spend it on watches now. And the funny thing about that is the watches accumulate. The car parts don't. You put an exhaust or a set of tires on that Porsche, you ain't seeing that money ever again. And so watches also are a good way. I never say you can invest in watches, but watches are a good value store. If there is a leak in the roof, you have some emergency money. You may not make a profit. You definitely won't make a profit. Although the more time you have to sell a watch, the more you'll get for that watch, because you have the patience then to hold off for a higher price. But you can't sell those tires to get the money. Well, you could sell the tires, but you're not going to get anywhere near what you paid for them. Whereas a watch, if you sell it even reasonably well, you're going to get 75 cents, 65 cents on the dollar. And not too many things can be sold at that ratio. Some cars, but even jewelry, almost all jewelry is traded as metal weight. And some jewelry stores will buy back the jewelry they sold you at 50%. But yeah, 50%. And a lot of pawn shops will give you 20%. But that's why the more time you have to sell, the more money you'll get for that watch. But watches are a worthwhile hobby. Let's put it that way. It's like stamp collecting. At the end of the day, those stamps are worth a lot of money. Or coin collecting. Those coins are worth a lot of money. And both of those hobbies, I did stamps when I was a kid. But both of those hobbies are also full of art and craftsmanship, womanship, and all of the things of watches in a different direction. There are people like I have a couple of Mont Blancs, but there are people who would say that that's just getting started. And there are people who drop $10,000, $15,000 on one fountain pen, or a camera or a lens. Every hobby. Well, I shouldn't say every. Um, Hobbies involved with craft, hobbies involved with engineering, with tech, with craft, I think is the best way to put it. Arts involved with craft are, hold their value and are worth acquiring, even if value should be the second thing you're thinking about, or even third when you're collecting anything. Plates, you should collect them first to make your heart glad. And second, if it matches your style. Maybe you change your style to match whatever it is that enamored you. Maybe it turns out that watch opened up your unknown desire to be outdoorsy or swimmy or whatever you get into very heavily, because the watch opened up that avenue for you. But German watches, like I was saying. So then you've got what I like to call luxury Swiss watch companies, like Omega, Longines, Rado, Tudor, Breitling. I deliberately don't want to talk about Rolex and the like, because once we start going to that level, either you're into it for the money or you're into it because you know watches enough that you know what you're buying. The Jaeger-LeCoultre, right? If you're hunting for a Jaeger-LeCoultre, you pretty much know what you're looking for. Because, like I said, now you're not getting anything for less than 9K out of them. And there are other companies like that. Like, people keep saying how the Laureato, the Girard-Perregaux Laureato, is a nice alternative to the Royal Oak, but that's still 15, 20K. Tissot PRX is a good alternative to the Royal Oak. I mean, it all depends on how you look at it and how big your pockets are. There are people who would say, my collection is exorbitant, but I live in a one-bedroom apartment. I spend all my extra money on watches and the rest I waste. But I'm a collector. It's like a guy who lives in a one-bedroom apartment and he's got a, Pontiac GTO vintage parked outside with a custom-made cover on it. All the value of their household is parked on four wheels. And I've been that guy too, but I was a Porsche 944 guy, because they're a relatively easy car to maintain. And I'm a jackleg mechanic. My father owned a garage and gas station in Brooklyn. I grew up in Queens. And so I would buy a beat up 944 and restore it and let it run, and drove it until I couldn't maintain it anymore, and then I'd sell it and buy a new beat up one that I could fix. I went through 2 924s and 3 944s, and when you think about how much money those saving money by restoring them myself and the parts and all of that other, I'd have that Girard-Perregaux constant force escapement. See, so yeah, watches. I'll never say don't buy cars. I'd never say don't collect cars. I have a friend collects cars. I mean, he's got 5, which to me is a collection, and some of them are vintage, like 50s, 60s vintage, not too old. But then again, we're as far away from the 50s as the 50s is from the turn of the century, the previous century. I didn't want to screw up with my math, because I did have a drink before I got here, and I am sipping whiskey right now. But yeah, I went across the street I live very close to the Wiesbaden train station, and they've got a American style restaurant, not bad food, called Chillers there. So let's see. Web Hezzy, thanks for my service. You're welcome. I was radio traffic analyst, signals. I mean, I was tactical, so I didn't do any really hush hush stuff, which is why I can talk about what I was on the border, and we would monitor the Russians, make sure they didn't do anything stupid. But yeah, I was the essentially the 1800s version of the guy with binoculars looking across the frontier, just making sure. But a lot of people did. I was just one of many, 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 many servicemen and women who served on the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. Cold War veteran prop. L Train, hey, nice to see you. Let's see, we've got about another 15 minutes because I started a little late, so we got about another 15, 20 minutes left in the show. Ask anything you wanted to, or bring up any topic you'd like, but I was might as well continue on the talk because I wanted to, touch on another category, micro brands. Like I would call Nevada a micro brand because even though it's an old legacy company, they're still getting on their feet as trying to get back into the mainstream. Companies like Farrer, Farrer's getting there too. They're growing and growing and growing. They've got some decent pieces. I really, I do like this Farrer. I can't get it to focus. I'm gonna leave it alone. Companies like Farrer, companies like Laurier, Squale, Trasca. The Trasca GMT has got the new Miyota GMT movement in it, so it's a travel GMT, and it's got an internal timing bezel. I'm actually thinking of getting one just for the heck of it, if only for the show, and sell it. But I mean, I might like it and make it my travel beater, because never hurts to have a good GMT when you're traveling. But sometimes you don't necessarily want to wear something that's going to attract too much attention to itself. Because I love I really do. Where is it? Here it is. No, here it is. I really do love my IWC. And the GMT, the little window shows the time in 24 hour. Limited edition, one of 1158. But there were places I wouldn't fly into wearing this. And the funny thing is, this strap, which matches it so beautifully, is actually the Ratto strap that I got with my Captain Cook. But it fits this watch so much better. I said, screw it. It does look nice on it. Any new acquisitions in sight? Well, like I said, I'm gonna get that Omega alarm piece. I told the guy who was selling it to me that I would give him an extra 150 if he had it serviced first. I'd split the cost of the service with him because he's someone I bought watches from before, and he's the person who I actually send my Rolexes and other high-end pieces to his watchmaker. So I was saying, hey, send it to your watchmaker, and I'll even cover some of the cost of it going to, because I know the watchmaker is going to give him a break. So I'm just letting him know that I really wanted to have it, but I wanted to have it serviced, and he's having it serviced right now because my son-in-law's Sea Dweller is winding weird, so I sent that off, and my Universal Genève Senna, which has only got a value, I shouldn't say only, but which has a value 7750 in it, so it's not going to be a nightmare to have service, and that's off as well. So, which is part of what I talked about last week. That's 3 watches that I've got out on service right now that have costs over and above. Well, my son-in-law, he's gonna have to pay for his own service. But I'm gonna have to pay for the 200-300, probably 300-400 on the 7750 tune-up because I want him to disassemble and clean it and reassemble. And well, the Omega, since I'm the watchmaker, the dealer is sending it to the watchmaker before selling it to me. I don't have to worry about spending more than the money that I had promised to give him for the watch when he's ready, and because he's gonna let me have it for that money, and it'll be a nice vintage, good looking piece. It's a good looking piece as well, so it's going to give me another fun watch to wear at trade shows because then I can set the alarm for instead of pulling out my phone and trying to set the timer or whatever. I can just go bip 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 on the Omega. And bang, I'm able to have an alert to jump to the next booth at the trade show. So having an alarm watch at a trade show, I think, is gonna. I'm gonna give it a shot, obviously, because I haven't done it. Although I could probably. This has got an alarm in it, so although I wouldn't wear this with a suit at a trade show, so I guess I'll have to wait for that Omega. So yeah, the Omega is in sight. I'm thinking about getting the Longines GMT, the Diver GMT, the Aquaracer, I believe it is GMT. I'm thinking about that, but I'm not sure if I need another expensive GMT. I would rather get the Traska and give myself another viable alternative wear piece, for the like I said, places where I want to travel and I don't necessarily want to take an expensive watch. You know, but then again, another good piece to take, but this isn't a GMT. Like if I'm going somewhere, and I want to wear a nice watch, but I don't want to be too ostentatious about it. I wear the Nomos. I've got the metal strap for this, so I can wear it like that, or put a leather on it. But this watch is so plain Jane up front, it doesn't attract too much attention to itself. But like anything that is well made, I like to say it's like high resolution images. The closer you look, the more you see. So the closer you look at the face, you'll see that it's more than just a black face with white numerals on it. And of course, if you take it off and look in the back, you see that beautiful in-house Deutsche Uhrenwerk movement. So that's another path to follow as a watch collector, to buy pieces just because of what they represent. Like maybe you think about the Unitas movement and you were reading and you thought, wow, wouldn't it be nice to own a Unitas movement watch? You can get a watch with a Unitas movement in price range anywhere from $500 to $50,000, and get like I believe Victorinox even had one, but it was very undecorated, and Panerai got one, the 111, which is very highly decorated, and a swan neck regulator to boot. So you can also be a collector and chase watch types, and say, hey, I only want to get inexpensive enthusiast pieces. So I want to get my Alpinist, and I want to get my Scuba Dude, and I want to get my Devil Diver, and my Khaki Field. And frankly, that would be an awesome collection if you think about it. You'd have a piece for just about any occasion, and you'd be under 5K. No, you'd probably be under 6, because the Alpinist is over 1,000 or around 1,000. Devil Divers like 700 or so. So yeah, well, you could probably do it. Put together a good enthusiast 5 watch collection for under 5K, because the inexpensive ones in the list would balance out the ones that are expensive. And then you'd have a 5 watch collection that would crush fashion and would be respected by even this, unless they're a watch snob, but respected by any respectable watch collector. TH, I wore my G-Shock 6900 with a suit for a few years. That was before I started collecting, though. Well, and now you can get a G-Shock mod with a steel case and steel bracelet that looks like a Royal Oak. Although, again, I'm not a big metal bracelet with a suit, but you could definitely wear a Royal Oak with a suit. Well, actually, thanks to Daniel Craig, you can wear a Seamaster with a suit. So if you wear a diver with a suit, a good-looking high-end metal bracelet diver, you can wear just about any good-looking metal bracelet watch with a suit today. Although, interestingly enough, in Dr. No, Sean Connery wore his sub on a NATO strap on the beach and then switched it to a leather strap when he went out that evening in a suit. A lot of people don't notice that. So let's see. Johnny, did your Flieger have a jeweled movement, or was it more a work watch? Oh no, the Aristo Flieger, I believe it had like a Sellita 200 in it, which is a jeweled Swiss movement. The Aristo, well, all of the Stova, Laco, all of the German Flieger companies pride themselves on their stuff. I do have a no jewel pocket watch from begins with a K. I can't. I'm blanking, but it'll come to me. But I have a German World War II pocket watch with no jewels in it, made to be Kinzel, made to be robust, just like the first generation Timexes that could take a licking and keep on ticking. There were no jewels in those. They were metal on metal, metal pivots and all to make them very robust. Wire pins. That's why they were so robust. But they weren't made to be accurate. They were made to be functional and useful. And I mean, they were accurate if you didn't strap them to a propeller of a outboard motor, which they did in one episode, in one commercial, and it still worked. So, but if you just wore it like a normal person every day, it would keep pretty good time because even though there were no jewels in it, jewels are more about wear than accuracy. You can still have tight tolerances. Well, metal on metal, you wouldn't want to. Well, if it's well lubricated, you can get away with tight tolerances in a mechanical device. But those first generation Timexes were, yeah, more designed to be rugged than they were to be fancy. But then again, a lot of military, like the Kinzel I have. But most Fliegers you buy today are going to have, well, they might have a Seiko or a Miyota in them, even, but those are jeweled movements as well. I would say it's more about the number of jewels. You can get away with 9 jewels, 8 jewels. Some have 7. Some of the more famous movements, like the Unitas, has 17. The base, some companies may decide to change that out. Like any of the companies that are throwing chatons on their jewels are going to may add some jewels to the movement, because it never hurts to have more pivot points protected by jewels in a watch. Let's see. TH, heck yeah. So let's see. We're getting close to the end, but I wanted to think if I had any other final thoughts before we close out. But watch collecting, I will end with just my general thoughts on that whole thing, because, like I said, I always appreciated watches, but frankly, I didn't really get into collecting until the watches started talking to me through the window. Like one day I happened to walk by and I had a Breitling, but I bought it more because everybody else had one. And, I before I had the Breitling, I was a Seiko guy. I've owned a Swatch Chrono, back in the days when Swatch came out first. Bulova, I was never a big high-end watch guy. I just wanted to have a nice watch. But like I said, my focus was on cars. I just wanted to have a decent watch, just, because I did like watches, and my 7th grade science fair project was on horology. But it wasn't until I had, cash to spare, well, that I got into chasing, a higher end watch collection. I was just surprised how much money cars took up. And also the durable aspect of watch collecting, because there are watches that I've owned for 6 years, and I think I might have had the Breitling serviced once, and they'll be there when I pass them on to my kids, and they'll be there when they pass them on to their kids if they so choose. There are watches. I mean, I've got a repeater when we talk about pocket watches. That erotic one's from the 1920s, by the way, and I've got a quarter repeater from 1899. It's the original Swiss patent model from the Stoltz brothers. So that watch is 125 years old, and as long as it works, I had it serviced. As long as somebody takes care of it, it will always work. And that's one of the beautiful aspects. Well, cars too. If you have the money, you can always replace what's broken on it. It's a mechanical system. That's one of the nice things about a mechanical system, as opposed to an electromechanical system or a hydroelectron. Well, pneumatic is a little bit different. But if you're talking about a straight mechanical system, as long as you maintain it, it's going to last forever. Because it's mechanical. As long as the gears all line up and the pinions are all in place and things are lubricated and the proper energy is applied, it's going to function. This clock will be here long after I'm gone. And as I was joking, it's probably the only true heirloom in my horology collection because everything else may go by way of the auction block, but that'll be hanging on somebody's wall, probably within my family for the foreseeable future. But that's the nice thing about a good piece of horology, which is why you should collect beautiful watches and why you should go for something like this was pretty much my exit watch at the high end. This was my last high end watch that I purchased, and I don't plan to buy any others. And this is the Mont Blanc Nicholas Roussek chronograph, and it has rotating discs instead of pointers, and it's also a GMT, but it's a beautiful GMT. You should check out the video I have on it. And after I bought this, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm done. What I I could buy other more expensive watches, but I don't swim in those seas. I do believe that there's such a thing as having too much watch on your wrist, and I don't frequent the places and live in the scenes that I'm where. Well, actually, I don't have the means either. You know what I mean? If I had the means to play at that level, I would, but I don't. You know, so like I was saying, with current watch prices, I couldn't buy half the pieces in my collection right now. But I bought them over years. But still, the intervals will be way longer. Let's put it that way. But then I've always advocated saving for pieces. I always save for my pieces because it also gives you the time to think about whether you really want to buy them. Because sometimes while you're waiting and saving, you discover something or you find something better and you take that money and you put it towards that piece. That's another good reason to save for your purchases because then it gives you a war chest that allows you to scout and decide what your target is, which is always a good collecting strategy for any approach because you shouldn't buy a watch on credit. I mean, it's a luxury product. Even if it's a cheap watch, you're living in a world you don't need a watch. So if you're buying a watch on credit, you shouldn't save up for it. That's why better to buy $150 G-Shock than put a $1,500 Tissot or Longines or whatever on a credit card because you can always save and buy something else downstream. But the interest from an unpaid debt will hang over your head for a long time, depending on how fast you pay it off. But if you're using credit as a means of flexibly moving your money around, I've used a credit card to buy a watch, but then I moved the money to cover the expense, within the month. So to avoid the fees and all. But, don't put it on your credit account. Let's put it that way. Johnny, collecting brings the historical side of horology, which is very interesting. Well, that's one of the reasons I wanted to get this watch as well, because Nicholas Roussek invented the chronograph. And it was literally a time writer back then, because chronograph literally means time writer. That's why the homage to his name, not an homage to a design. This is an original design, but it's an homage to the man, Nicholas Roussek. It's got his name written on it on the rehaut. But he developed the first chronograph, and it was made for horse racing. And it had a set of pens, so you could mark the rotating disc for when the different horses came in, so you'd have an accurate time for each horse. And it didn't require the observer to do more than just push a button, which made it easy to use. And it was obviously quite successful. And to this day, the chronograph is the most popular complication on a watch after the date. And so this is to his legacy, as it were. And so this watch has got all tons. And this was also the Mont Blanc's first in-house movement. So they were swinging for the fences to get respect from the industry. 44 jewels. We were talking about jewels. This thing's full of jewels. The rotating disc chronograph, the fact that it's also a GMT, a travel GMT with really ingenious, the GMT hand hides behind the local time hand until you need it. It's horologically significant. It's historically significant, both on the corporate level for Mont Blanc's legacy of their watchmaking, because now Mont Blanc is recognized as a mainstream watchmaker. They managed to jump in pretty quickly. Well, at the luxury level, It's a different level than micro brands because you can be a micro brand in the luxury scheme, but as long as you're part of a luxury brand like Mont Blanc, you have that access now. You go to a Mont Blanc shop to buy a pen, there's an array of watches there, and nobody can say that Mont Blanc can't make. Well, they can't say Mont Blanc can't make watches either anymore, but nobody could ever say Mont Blanc couldn't make pens. So yeah, just collecting is a journey, and the path we take, just as our paths through anything are going to be relative, to our experience. As Einstein said, reality is based on the point of view of the observer, and that goes for everything. Watch collecting too. So we're a little after. Well, like I said, I started late, but we ran a little bit over an hour, which isn't bad. But I do like to end it after an hour because I'd rather end it with while we have something to say than wander off and what do I say to keep the clock running? Because I'm not that kind of a streamer. So until next week, Victorinox is another one. This is true. That's a good last word. Well, I did bring them up because of I mentioned that I believe they have a Unitas model with a display back even, I believe. I could be wrong, but I don't believe so. I have to look that up. But yeah, until we meet again. This week, I am going to do just one or two. I might do a couple of shorts, and I am going to do the little inexpensive one I picked up at the $20 dual time because it's actually a halfway decent GMT because it's independently settable displays, and well, you'll see it if you check out the episode. So until next week, take care, everybody. Love you all. Live long and prosper. Have a good day.